I ask that we all assume a posture of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day that you have shown us all. We pray that you would allow us to have a productive meeting as we discuss many challenges that are going on in our society today. And we pray that as we discuss these challenges, that we would inspire a new fire in everybody's lives to try and evoke change in everything that we do and in everything that we say. Moreover, we pray that your will be done over our own. And in Jesus Christ's name we all pray. Amen. Now I ask that you all stand for the presentation of the colors and the playing of the national anthem.
Good morning, Morehouse. Good morning. Before I do my simple task of welcoming Major General Bolden, I want to thank the organizers of this morning's Crown Forum, most especially the leadership within our ROTC program. So I want to, without going through names, which would take a little longer, I want us to just give a quick round of applause for all of those in our ROTC program who's made this moment possible. Retired Major General Bolden, this is truly an honor. Probably one of the biggest honors I've had since being here at Morehouse College, to welcome you to Morehouse College. On behalf of our interim president, President Harold Martin, on behalf of our Board of Trustees, on behalf of 16,000 alumni, 2,200 students, over 160 faculty, and over 300 staff, we truly welcome you to Morehouse College. And I'm going to ask everyone in the audience to stand and give him our signature Morehouse welcome by giving a rousing round of applause to Retired Major General Bolden. Thank you. And right now, I ask Captain Reinhardt, who will come and introduce Major General Bolden.
Morning, Morehouse. I know you've probably heard countless times since being here at Morehouse that you should always strive to set high goals and then do everything you can to achieve them. In the military, we say that we should always chase and become sustained superior performers. So it is truly my honor and my privilege to introduce today's guest speaker, and I truly mean that. This is an unbelievable honor and privilege. When I was, years ago, there was a Gatorade commercial that ran, and it was about Michael Jordan, the phenomenal Chicago Bulls star, and the series was entitled, "I Want to Be Like Mike." Well, my entire life when I was growing up, I wanted to be like General Bolden. In the 60s and 70s, the space program was every young man's aspiration. They wanted to fly, and they wanted to go to the moon, and they wanted to go into space. General Bolden is a graduate of the Naval Academy. I decided, all right, I want to go to the Naval Academy. He majored in STEM. I didn't. I couldn't have done that. But he continued on to be a Marine aviator, graduated, went on to fly A-6s, which is arguably one of the most amazing aircraft ever built. Went on to fly over 100 combat missions in Vietnam. Went on to become a test pilot for the United States Navy and accumulated over 6,000 hours in military aircraft. That in and of itself is an absolutely unbelievable accomplishment. Then he applied for and was accepted to as an astronaut candidate in 1980. And the minimum qualifications to apply for that job pretty much eliminated thousands and thousands of people who would like to do that job. Of the ones that applied, a very, very, very small fraction actually got accepted. General Bolden has done 4 missions, 2 as a pilot in command and 2 as mission commander of various missions to space on different space shuttle missions. He spent 14 years as an astronaut. Then he went back, after that sustained superior performance as a test pilot and an astronaut, went back to the Marine Corps, served in various staff jobs and other operational jobs, rising to the rank of 2-star Marine General. Had a phenomenal career, decided to retire, was in the private sector for a period of time, and then got called back to public service in 2009 when President Obama appointed him as the NASA administrator, which he maintained that position until January of this year. I've traveled to hundreds of countries over 100 countries in my career. I've met presidents, vice presidents, royal family, movie stars, rock stars, international sports figures, and actually I've met Michael Jordan. I can tell you that without a doubt, this is the highest honor that I've had. This is the pinnacle of sustained superior performance. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Major General Bolden. And General, please come up. Please give him another round of applause. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Please. Thank you very much. You know, it's indeed a pleasure for me to be back here, and I say back here because in a way, I feel like I'm a member of the Morehouse family. I am privileged to have two women in my family, my daughter, my baby girl, and my wife, who are alums of Spelman. So I spent a lot of time down here off and on the campus as they were going through school through the years. And so it's always good to come back. I want to express my sincere appreciation to the Associate Provost, Dr. David Rice, for his invitation to join this collection of Morehouse men and members of the Morehouse College community who are here this morning for the Crown Forum event. You know, as I learned from going to your college's website, the Crown Forum experience provides the means by which students may begin to meet the challenge of developing to their highest potential and form a partnership with the academic program to foster a well-rounded college education. And before I go any farther, in light of all that has gone on around us over the past few months, I'd like to ask for you all to take just a moment to reflect and offer your own special prayers for the people in Las Vegas who underwent incredible trauma over the last week or so, for people from the state of Texas and Louisiana and other Gulf Coast states, the state of Florida, for Puerto Rico, and for the Virgin Islands, all of whom citizens of this great nation who have suffered mightily over the last few months. So if you would just take a moment in your own way and offer a prayer for them. You know, in listening to several of your former forum speakers on YouTube, believe it or not, yeah, I went to YouTube because I wanted to know what I was getting myself into by coming here. And one thing I can promise you is that you will not hear from me. I will make no effort to match them in oratory skills. I heard preachers, I heard would-be preachers, I heard wannabe preachers, and you know, there is, and I say this in all sincerity, and I say it with a great deal of respect. And those of you who are actually Morehouse men, you understand this. There's a certain cadence. I'm not sure whether they teach you this or whether you pick it up, but there's a certain cadence in the conversation of a Morehouse man. And whether they're a minister or what, you always get the feeling that you're getting ready to hear a sermon. When what you're actually going to do is carry on a conversation or an argument with a Morehouse man. Your fame is renowned around the world. But what I would like to do instead is spend the next several minutes of your time sharing my perspectives on some of the critical questions of your time that are pondered each day by our nation's civil space agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. One of my great joys in serving as the NASA administrator, and I'm going to see if I can get this thing to work here. Point that way. All right. Let's see. You all tell me when it changes to the next slide. All right, it's coming. Maybe. Okay, we got it. So when there are three questions that should be at the top of that slide but aren't there. First of them is there life elsewhere in the universe? A second one is, are we alone? And the third one is, can life exist somewhere else today? So those may seem like trivial questions to you, but they are not. They are questions that people have pondered probably since the beginning of time. You know, one of my great joys while serving as the NASA administrator was getting a chance to meet with young people such as those of you in this audience all over the world. And while it may not feel like it, you can take it from me, since I'm a little bit older than you, that being any age less than 75 is still young. Let me share with you a couple of quotes as an introduction to my remarks today. And these
they sort of go like this. Quote number 1 says, the first day or two up there, and by up there, the person speaking is talking about being in space. You try to recognize the countries. Then the speaker names his own country and says, it stands out. It's very distinct. Then you keep missing the countries and you look only at the continents. By the 6th day, the whole world becomes a beautiful blue and white and yellow painting. These boundaries really disappear. With me, they still are, unquote. The second quote is, there is no better place to emphasize the unity of people in the world than flying in space. We are all the same people, we are all human beings, and I believe that most of us, almost all of us, are good people, unquote. The first quote actually comes from Prince Sultan Salman Abdulaziz Al Saud of Saudi Arabia, after flying as a member of the STS-51G shuttle crew in June of 1985. The second by the late Israeli astronaut Ilan Ramon during his ill-fated STS-107 mission in January of 2003 aboard the shuttle Columbia. I was in Jerusalem for an international scientific conference, the 66th International Astronautical Congress, 2 years ago, and at that time they were in the midst of an unusually volatile and violent period there. I reflected on these two quotes as I moved around Jerusalem, and I don't have to remind anyone in this audience that these are challenging times in that part of the world. In fact, these are increasingly challenging times throughout the world, particularly here in our own country. Yet, there we were, an international community gathered in that place to talk about our shared destinies. One of the highlights of my trip was the opportunity to meet with a group of young people who call themselves the Space Generation Advisory Council, a group of young professionals 35 years and younger, and to listen to their dreams and aspirations of a future world at peace with human presence extended beyond low Earth orbit, deeper into our solar system. Today, NASA is engaged in missions to planets in our solar system as well as places outside our solar system. This is a mission called Juno that made a 5-year trek to the planet Jupiter, is now orbiting Jupiter. It's somewhat unique in that for the first time in what we know as human history, we were able to get to one of the outer planets using solar power. Didn't use a nuclear propulsion the way that we usually do. So Juno has incredibly new generation solar panels that power it. This is a mission, if I can get it, or if there's somebody just change it manually, that'll work also. This is a mission that we launched last year called Osiris Rex. And Osiris Rex is actually just swung around Earth for an acceleration. It's on its way to meet up with an asteroid that's orbiting our sun, but it's going to pass close to Earth. And when I say close to Earth, that's relative. Okay, we won't see it, we won't feel it, we won't even know it went by. But the asteroid is called Bennu. And Osiris Rex is actually going to meet up with Bennu, going to do a couple of years orbiting Bennu and surveying it with its cameras and sensors and decide on an optimal landing place. And then Osiris Rex is going to descend to near the surface of Bennu, and it's going to hover just ever so close to the surface and stick out a big arm in the middle of the body of the satellite and kick up dust on the surface of Bennu and capture it in a container and then bring it back to Earth. So in 2023, that many years from now, we'll have this canister that will be dropped over the desert in Utah, and for the first time, we'll actually have a sample that's taken from a sun-orbiting asteroid that'll help us understand a little bit more about our own universe, about our own Earth, planet Earth. Having been blessed to see our planet from space, I can attest that from up there, you really don't see borders. You see a place seemingly at peace, in tranquility, one beautiful planet. I was explaining to some of the midshipmen this morning, or maybe I wasn't, that one of the things that I noticed on this planet that is 75% water, we live on a water planet. there is one ocean. There are not multiple oceans. We always talk about the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian. There's one ocean. And in that one ocean stick these bodies of land periodically. Big ones we call continents, smaller ones we call islands, some we call atolls. Some have disappeared from the face of the earth with rising sea level, and we may never see them again. But that's our planet. If you look really closely from space, you can see something else. It's a big sign that says help wanted. Well, not really. But it ought to be there, because I came here today to tell you that our planet needs you. We need your leadership. We need your ingenuity. We need your imagination. We need increased international cooperation and collaboration. For those of you, and I recognize there's some that are not as young as the students here, but for those of you who may be professors or staff members who are in your 30s or younger, as well as the students, you're actually in that sweet spot in life when, on the one hand, you're old enough to be role models and mentors. On the other hand, you're still young enough that your professional and civic lives are really just beginning, and you're more likely to be forgiven for your errors and inactions than later in life. Some of you have younger siblings. Some may be mentoring younger students in neighboring communities or neighboring schools to Morehouse. In many ways, your future lives and careers will be defined by how we respond to the question of how we as one planet can come together to tackle some of the greatest challenges. I'm here this morning to tell you that I believe space exploration is one of the most important tools that your generation will use to bring about a better future that you deserve, a more peaceful future, a greener future. This instrument is massive. It's called the James Webb Space Telescope, and if you look at the very top, you will see a person that has on a mask. That's how big this telescope is, and that's just the mirror. It's actually 16 segmented mirrors that make up what we call the James Webb Space Telescope. In the last few years, we have been using other telescopes to discover planets, some of which are very much like our own Earth, orbiting other suns, other stars. We call them exoplanets, and some people believe that we may actually find life on those other planets. The James Webb Space Telescope, when we fly it to space next November, not this November, but November of 2018, James Webb's going to be positioned in a stable place, a Lagrange point, a point where gravity among the sun, the moon, and Earth kind of balance each other out, so it just sits there, and it's going to appear from that vantage point 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth at the rest of the universe. James Webb, if it works the way we designed it, is going to enable us to look into some of these exoplanets, some of these planets orbiting other stars, and actually look into their atmospheres and tell us what the makeup of the atmosphere is, and tell us whether or not there is a chance that there may be life there. Yours will be a future where human beings have pushed farther into the universe, not just to visit, but, as President Obama used to say, to stay there. Yours is a life in which we're going to continue to investigate places inside our own solar system, like these water moons or water worlds. These are giant moons orbiting some of the planets, some of the outer planets, and what makes them unique is that, for the most part, they're covered in water, and generally with an ice crust over the water. And scientists are beginning to believe, because we've seen geysers coming through some of them, like the one up at the top called Enceladus, that is one of the moons of Jupiter, or Titan, one of the moons of Saturn. And we see these geysers, when we peer through them with sensors, they actually have elements that are like those that are needed to sustain life here on Earth. So it gives us thought that there may actually be some type of microbial life in the oceans of these large moons. Not only are we interested in life on planets such as Mars, but there's a growing interest in the possibility of life on these ocean worlds. This interest is universal across our globe, and it demands our leadership in international relations. To me, public diplomacy and cooperation in space go together. My youngest granddaughter is 11 years old, and she loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So to me, public diplomacy and cooperation go together like peanut butter and jelly. They just do. All told, at NASA today, they have roughly 800 active international agreements with more than 120 international partners, and they range in everything from fundamental STEM education all the way up to cooperation on the International Space Station. While the purpose of these agreements is generally scientific and technological, it's not lost on me that, like so many things when it comes to space, there are also spin-off benefits. Folk across the world generally have viewed us, Americans, as generous, compassionate, innovative, and peaceful people. When I was the age of many of you in this audience, much was made about the fact that our country was in a space race with the Soviet Union. Well, today, we're not in a space race with anybody. If there is a race in space today, it's among the commercial entities like SpaceX and Blue Origin and the commercial guys that are trying to change the face of space exploration. So let me see if I can get it to work, or go to the next one if there's somebody in the booth with it. Okay. Today, a child who is 17 years old or younger, and I actually met one in the Naval ROTC who is 17 years old. So if there are any others of you in the audience who are 17 or younger, I'm talking to you. You have not lived a single day of your life. You have not taken a single breath in your time on this planet when human beings have not been living and working on this thing, on the International Space Station, 250 miles above Earth. We have been working there cooperatively with our partner nations for 17 years plus now. I still maintain that the space station ought to be considered for the Nobel Peace Prize, because in that entire 17 years, one of our major partners has been Russia. We have worked collaboratively with them. There has never been a day, not a second, not any moment when we have not had at least 2 crew members on board, and when we go down to 2 crew members, one's an American and one's a Russian. And in spite of all of our inability to get along diplomatically and politically at the present, astronauts and cosmonauts are able to come together as a team and work on the International Space Station. Think about this. Tens of thousands of people from across 15 countries have been involved in the construction of this station and its operations, all working toward common goals of discovery, understanding, and human progress. The future of space exploration will create some remarkable opportunities for your generation and others to follow. In fact, it already has. And these opportunities can be summarized in one word: Mars. Let me explain why I say that. Our story begins with U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower, long before any of you were born. You see, presidents since the time of Eisenhower have every single one of them, floated the idea of sending humans to Mars. But about 14 years ago, we had a horrible, horrible accident, or a horrible setback, when on February 1st, 2003, we lost the Space Shuttle Columbia and its entire 7-person crew. Following that accident, the United States made the decision that we should phase out of the shuttle program in favor of a new partnership with private industry and entrepreneurs to produce commercially available services to carry cargo and people to low Earth orbit. The shuttle had already had a remarkable 3 decades long run like no other. I traveled to space 4 times on the shuttle, and I can tell you that I love the spacecraft. But every technology evolves over time, and although this was a decision to which I did not arrive lightly, I agreed, and President Obama agreed, that we should follow the recommendation of the prior administration, and we agreed, as did most people in the space community at the time, that we should phase out of the shuttle and that we should set our sights on something bigger. And so in 2010, can we go to the next one? Yeah. In 2010, President Barack Obama came to the Kennedy Space Center to Cape Canaveral, Florida, and he delivered what I consider to be a major space policy address. In it, he laid out a plan to replace our unsustainable exploration trajectory with a clear, affordable, financially sustainable, and ambitious way forward. A way forward that would expand humanity's presence deeper into the universe while strengthening America's leadership in the world space community. President Obama called for expanding human and robotic exploration of the solar system. The centerpiece of his plan was and still is a journey to Mars. That will culminate with sending astronauts from the family of spacefaring nations back to the moon in the decade of the 20s, just around the corner, and then on to the red planet in the 2030s. Today, to complete this journey, the President envisioned that NASA would expand its international cooperation to include non-traditional partners from around the world and would continue to develop the spacecraft, rockets, and other technologies that will bring America and partner astronauts to deep space. As part of these efforts, we expanded our work with commercial and international partners on the technologies that drive exploration and have a legacy of creating spin-off benefits here on Earth. And I'm referring to both economic benefits and benefits to our health and quality of life. The satellites that I show you here are a part of that journey to Mars. They're actually, if you look from left to right on the top, the orbital ATK Cygnus is now one of our primary means of taking cargo to the International Space Station. On the right is the SpaceX Dragon, which does the same and brings cargo back. And down on the bottom left, which you can't see very well, but it is a Russian spacecraft called Progress. And then on the right is a Japanese spacecraft that's called the HTV. So we now have not only commercial capability, but international partner capability to take cargo from this planet to the International Space Station. And Boeing and SpaceX are currently working to get us to the point where humans can travel to space on commercial spacecraft, and no longer will we be reliant on the Russians to get our crews to space. And this one, I may need a little help from the booth again. If you just press it once, and it should start this one in motion. Go back one to that one you just left. And I'm not going to dwell on it if it doesn't work. So if you can get it to go back to that one that we just left, and then see if you just touch a button and see if it starts to roll. Now, just go back to it. What it essentially will show you, if we were able to get it to run, is it's the global temperature rise here on this planet since the time that we began to measure global temperature until 2015. Following the joint NASA-NOAA announcement last year that 2015 was the warmest year on record, I was quoted as saying, "Climate change is the challenge of our generation, and NASA's vital work on this important issue affects every person on Earth." Today's announcement, that was the announcement that was made last year, not only underscores how critical NASA's Earth observation program is, it's a key point that should make policymakers stand up and take notice. Now is the time to act on climate. President Obama's final guidance was that we would extend the life of the International Space Station in low Earth orbit to at least 2024, and to replace the space shuttle, we would work with American commercial partners to send cargo and crew to the station, thus helping to facilitate a robust commercial space market and develop a dependable commercial launch system. 7 years after President Obama challenged NASA to send astronauts to Mars in the 2030s, I firmly believe we're closer to sending human beings to the red planet than ever before in human history. In the words of our President Donald Trump, we will unlock the mysteries of space. Meanwhile, a new consensus is emerging in the scientific and policy communities around the global exploration roadmap developed in 2013 through the efforts of some 25 international partners. Since these days, early days on our current exploration trajectory, the Orion crew vehicle has been flown farther into space than any spacecraft built for human passengers has flown in more than 4 decades. We flew that back in December of 2014. The European Space Agency, or ESA, the responsible agency for developing Orion service module, its power and propulsion component, continues its steady march for final delivery. The Space Launch System rocket, which is the heavy lift rocket that's going to carry all this to space, that will someday propel international astronauts to deep space, has moved from concept to development and construction. And so what I want to show you here for just about a couple of minutes is a video Some of it is cartoonish. Most of it is actual footage of tests that are underway or tests that have been conducted in preparing the Space Launch System, Orion, and other components to go to deep space, to go back to the moon and on to Mars. If I can get them to turn the volume up, it'll wake you up, it'll get you excited. There's a lot of fire and smoke and all that stuff, but this is actually what is, for some of you who may have worked as interns in the summertime, say at Boeing or Lockheed Martin, you may have actually seen some of this hardware. For those of you who want to get in the aerospace industry, when you graduate, you will probably work with some of this hardware. But these are not things on a drawing board anymore. This is test that is currently going on. So if I can go to the next one in the booth, and you may have to do this manually. Find the go button on the bottom of that slide. If you move your little, if you touch it, it should start, to be quite honest. So let's see if we can get this one to work. Hit the forward button. Technology. Yeah, if you go down near the bottom, you should see a little, it'll pop up and you can hit the forward arrow. It'll cause the video to start. Maybe not good. Well, maybe I won't be able to get you excited and fired up. Hit the forward button once to advance it. No, that's okay. It's not going to work for us today. I apologize. You know, nations across the globe continue to make new discoveries with a lot of the international missions we've flown. On the horizon in the next few years are missions such as the James Webb Space Telescope that I mentioned, InSight, which is actually going to go to Mars and is going to drill into the core of Mars, Mars 2020, which is going to actually collect carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere and dissociate it into get oxygen and hydrogen, and actually produce breathable oxygen and oxygen that we can use as a propellant in some of our rockets. And then a mission that we're working in conjunction with the United Arab Emirates today called the Emirati Mars mission that they plan to launch in late 2020 to arrive at Mars and begin to go into Martian orbit in 2021 to help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the United Arab Emirates, a mission that's going to study Mars's atmosphere along with what we're doing and what India is doing. There's a significant transformation that I strongly believe must be made, however, and some of you, if there are any of you who are studying Mandarin or Chinese dialect here on campus, you may be able to identify this. I think that in order to optimize our chances for advancing our efforts to extend human presence deeper into our solar system, that transformation will need to include men and women of the China National Space Administration, or CNSA, into the current family of nations working on the International Space Station, and to include their ideas on lunar and Mars human exploration into our deliberations on the road ahead. Critically important today is that our journey is starting to capture the public's hearts and minds and imagination. There's a tangible sense that I get as I travel around the world and meet folks that space exploration is in vogue right now. The coolness factor is what inspires young kids to want to study science and write a science fiction story, like The Martian. And all these things make a difference. Inclusion of the Chinese into our team of innovators and explorers will allow us to make an even bigger difference. When I think of the world in which my granddaughters will be raising their own children, I see a world where their kids view human beings living and working on Mars as a fact of life, much as they view living on the International Space Station today. A future where NASA and its international partners are using Mars as a stepping stone to the rest of the solar system. I see a future where a robust private space industry is launching human beings, cargo, and satellites of all sizes to space at a significantly lower price point, thanks to the work we're doing today to make launches more affordable and advance emerging small satellite technologies like CubeSats and nanosats. A future where the next great global space and technology company utilizes technologies developed for space travel to develop a product that improves our quality of life here on earth. A company founded by someone sitting in this audience today. A future where flying from Atlanta to Tokyo is a better experience both for people in the plane and on the ground, because we've succeeded in reimagining air traffic management, and we've made flight faster, cleaner, greener, safer, and quieter. And by flight, I mean both airplanes and helicopters. I see a future where my grandchildren's children are drinking cleaner water, breathing cleaner air, and making use of cleaner energy, not only because our international partnerships have helped us better understand climate change, but because the work of our scientists are doing in areas like green aviation and water purification. I see a future where fewer citizens of this planet are losing a sister or a son because the medical technologies we perfect to protect our astronauts in space from exposure to radiation on a long-duration space flight help revolutionize medicine that impacts the lives of their relatives. Or because the technologies we've developed to detect signs of life on other planets continues to help emergency workers listen for beating hearts in the rubble after a disaster. I see a world, as we saw in Hidden Figures, the incredible movie, where girls and young people of color are more excited about pursuing education in science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. A world where, unlike today, there will no longer be any states in the United States where no women take the Advanced Placement AP Computer Science exam, thanks in part to NASA's work to promote STEM education and careers. Your own Dr. Rudy Horn, from right here at Morehouse, was a technical consultant for the math portion of Hidden Figures. So for those of you who saw the movie, all of Katherine Johnson's computations and everything, Dr. Horn had to validate. So if you are really smart and you saw something wrong on the board, go find Dr. Horn and tell him he made a mistake. But I don't think you're going to find any. I see a future where people in even the most remote corners of our world have access to Wi-Fi, as do astronauts living and working in space today. I see a future where maybe, just maybe, humanity finds the answer to those age-old questions of whether we're alone in our universe. And last slide, if you will. While none of us can know for sure what the future has in store, there's one thing we can say with good degree of certainty. None of these things can happen on their own. They will require future leaders to continue to make the choices that point us in this direction. Future presidents, future administrators, and future citizens. We are embarked on a visionary course. It's my sincere hope that future leaders from all sides of the political spectrum and throughout the world see it through, because I truly believe that the sort of future I laid out is within our grasp. As I close, I want to share with you a quote from the Department of State telegram written before any of you students here were born. It was written in July 1969 after Apollo 11 landed on the moon. And I quote, "The Russian press was surprisingly generous with its praise of the men behind Apollo 11 and the American space research in general during the days that the historic moon voyage was in progress. But now they seem to fear that the landing may have increased respect for the Americans around the world." You have to remember, it was the Cold War, after all. Another State Department telegram read, 5,000 Hungarians walked through the American embassy yesterday. They came to pay tribute to Apollo 11. They came in overalls, spattered with paint, in smocks and in tie and suit. Without shirts, old and bent, young and athletic, students, workers, old people, unquote. It noted that even the secret police were cooperative and good-natured. Indira Gandhi, then the Prime Minister of India, declared that the moon landing was one of the most exciting and significant moments in human history. The Queen of England reportedly stayed up with her children to watch. The Pope spoke about humankind's pursuit of a new destiny. In New York City, people took to the streets to dance and to celebrate. The Houston Chronicle wrote, and I quote, "For a moment it seemed that all men were brothers. Communist journalists congratulated American scientists. Israeli photographers beamed at Egyptian broadcasters. Brown hands clasped white ones, and few eyes were dry. The word went out in 30 languages to 1,535 radio and television networks, to 1,056 newspapers, and to 445 magazines in 57 countries. We witnessed similar worldwide reactions on the evening that Curiosity touched down on Mars back in 2014, after surviving its 7 minutes of terror through the Martian atmosphere on its entry. But as I close, I want you to just think about what it's going to be like when you're with your loved ones watching the first astronauts from Earth reach Mars, or even more excitedly when one of those astronauts is someone with whom you grew up, or someone with whom you studied at Morehouse, or Spelman, or Georgia State, or somewhere else in the consortium. To make this trip happen, we need you. We need every single one of you in this audience today. I end with a plea to you to become leaders in our world and to join with me to turn science fiction into science fact and make the impossible possible. You can do that. You can do that. You have to believe in yourselves. You have to have faith in what you've been taught and what you've learned, because you can make a difference. May God add his blessings to all of you in this future endeavor. Thank you very much.